Hello everyone. So with this tutorial, I want to quickly go through how to prep your image for the parenting exercise. And to do that, I've provided on Canvas this image of a woman doing a yoga pose. Now, this isn't a perfect image for the parenting exercise, but I want to work with that as well. So what's important when you're creating these puppets for parenting is that all the body parts can't have overlap, right? So you'll notice that the hand is overlapping the leg, and you want to avoid as much of that overlap as possible because when we extract, in this case, the hand, we're going to have a chunk of leg missing and we're going to have to fill that in. First thing we do once the image is open is I'm going to go over here to my layers panel and I'm going to double click on where it says background and I will just relabel this body. And what this does is it actually changes not only the title, but I've transformed this background layer into a floating layer that can be extracted with transparency underneath. Right. So I'm going to go ahead over here to my different selection tools, and we have the lasso family, third tool from the top, and you hover over those and you see the lasso tool, polygonal lasso tool, magnetic lasso tool, and so on. So we'll be using those, and then in addition, there's the object selection tool, quick selection tool, and magic wand tool. Now, for each of these tools, there are options at the top, right? So for the object selection tool, I can either create a new selection, add to selection, subtract from selection, or intersect with selection. And we'll be talking mostly about these three right here. So the object selection tool is great. It's kind of a smart selection tool. And that is in the fourth from the top. And I'll just draw a sort of rectangular selection around my person. And that should get you most of the way there. Now, if I zoom in a little bit, I'm going to notice that there are parts that have not been selected, right? So this part of the leg and so on. So with my lasso tool selected, I'll choose add to selection, and I can go in then and I can get the toes a little bit better. And it's important that you're doing add to selection rather than new selection, right? So you want the second selection option where I'm hovering my cursor, right? And that allows you to go in and kind of add in places where those parts got kind of cut out. And I'll just go ahead and here's another part right by the hand. And a couple of fingers got missed and so on. Now there might be places where you need to subtract, right? Maybe you got piece of wall or something like that, and then you would choose your subtract from selection tool. So far, I'm just needing to add, and it makes sense right here where there's a nose, like, you know, it's too close to the color of the wall, which I think is why that was missed. Now, I will actually go in with my subtract from selection, and there's a little bit of wall that got added where it shouldn't have. All right, so one more little section here where the foot is. Now, if I Command X, it's going to extract everything and then create a new layer simply by clicking Shift Command V. Well, Command V is paste, but the Shift Command V allows us to paste in place. So then I'll go back to my object selection tool, but this time I'm just going to select the area around the arm, maybe a little bit of the head's in there. And I can see that it selected a little bit of the hair. So I can go to one of my other selection tools, the lasso tool, and I can go to subtract from selection and deselect by dragging around that hair. And then I'm going to go ahead and Command X to subtract that arm and Shift Command V to paste in place. Right? So now that arm is just on its own layer. And if I make invisible the background and the person's body, all I see is the arm. All right? And then we talked about having a layer hierarchy where you need at least 3 layers in the layer hierarchy. So now I'm going to go ahead and select the forearm from the upper arm. And I'll go ahead and do that now. And once again, Command X to cut, Shift Command V to paste in place. And now I can start labeling some of these things. So I will label this top layer forearm, and I'm going to label this upper arm. And for now, that's all I'm going to focus on. I'm not going to worry about like separating the legs and all that kind of stuff. So I want to actually overlap a little bit of the upper arm with the forearm, so that when in After Effects I rotate that forearm, there's a little bit of overlap for it to rotate on. So imagine like a paper puppet in which you put pins at the joints, and there's always a little bit of overlap between the different rotating parts. So I'm going to select, even though there's nothing there, I'm going to select my upper arm. And it's important this happens on the upper arm layer, since that's what I'm dealing with, right? So I create a little protruding area right in front of the upper arm. So the next thing I'll do is choose my clone stamp tool and fill in that area, that part of the arm that is selected, but there's nothing there right now. So again, important that I'm on my upper arm layer. And you can see my clone stamp brush is pretty big. And so I'm going to decrease the size of that. And I can either do that by going and changing the size up here, or I could also use my open and close brackets, right, to change the size of the brush that way. All right, so I'm gonna right about there. All right, now to make the clone stamp tool work, you have to have the clone stamp tool selected. It's about midway down on your toolbar over here. And I'm going to click the Option key on my keyboard, and I'm going to just choose an area of the arm, and you can see this little crosshairs. And so basically what's going to happen, I option click that, I see my crosshairs, and then I click with my mouse on that section, right? And so what I'm telling the clone stamp tool to do is to sample from this part of the arm here, and then put it over here where I will now paint. All right, and so it's created arm where there was an arm. So again, that's option click where you want the clone stamp tool to sample from, and in this case, this part of the arm, and then place it. Once you've selected that sample, you can then up click on the option tool and start painting away. Since I've created a selection here, the clone stamp tool does not go outside those bounds. All right. So now when I put the forearm back, I mean, it's kind of a little wonky, I know, where you get this like divide, right? But that's okay, because, you know, there's definitely a stylized aspect to what we're doing. In the end, you should extract every body part that you plan on moving independently in After Effects. so that when you import your multi-layered Photoshop file into After Effects as a composition retain layer sizes, you have control over the 3-layer hierarchy.